Hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Archita, and I lead the Member Association program at FIAPO, and I will be your moderator for today's session. First of all, I would like to welcome each and every one of you today to this webinar on fundraising, crowdfunding campaigns through storytelling, where we will explore the different fundamentals of crowdfunding, the importance of it, the science behind storytelling with lots of case studies and examples, and a lot more. I'm extremely delighted today to present our speakers for this evening. Please welcome Yogita Verma and Bharati Ramachandran here with us today, and to share a bit about both our speakers. So, Yogita Verma leads Breakthrough India's resource mobilization and communication efforts and is passionate about working to transform the gender norms that perpetuate the violence against women. Prior to Breakthrough, she also headed the resource mobilization at Child Rights and You. Yogita is also an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta. And before moving to the development sector, she also spent close to a decade at the Nestle India as a marketing professional. Thank you so much, Yogita, for being here. And it's a great, great pleasure to have you here with us today. All right, moving on, we have Bharati Ramachandran. She is the CEO of FIAPO and a communications and fundraising professional with over 26 years of experience, of which 2 decades have been largely in the non-for-profit sector. She also works with non-profits to effectively tell their stories, raise funds, and also to change policy and attitudes. She is also an international keynote speaker and the masterclass trainer on resource mobilization. Thank you so much, Bharti, for your time. And I would like to welcome you to the session as well. Before we move on, I would like to also make a very quick announcement to our attendees. Please feel free to write all your questions in the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. You can also enter your questions at the chat option. So without taking more of everybody's time, I would like to hand over the session over to you, Yogita. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Archita. Hello, everyone. Really, really excited to be here today. And I'm hoping that it'll be a really interactive session. So I've got a PPT, which I'm going to run through really, really quickly, like maybe 10, 15 minutes. And then I think Bharti speaks. But the idea really is to keep as much time at the end to just chat and like any questions you may have or any, anything you're planning to do that you'd like us to comment on. We would love to keep the session like really informal and interactive. I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know because the last time was not successful. So let me know if it works. Yeah. Is the presentation visible?
Yes, Yogita.
Okay, perfect. So really, I think a lot of my presentations really focused on the fundraising aspect of it. And Bharti, who's a master storyteller and really the communication specialist, will talk more about storytelling. But for me, I think a lot of people, when they first come in and they talk about fundraising and crowdfunding, I think there's a sense of hesitation and a fear that they may not be good at it. And I think the pushback I always have is that every one of us has always been a good fundraiser. And it's just really depends on the causes that you're most passionate about. And if you think back to your school days, all of us have grown up selling raffle tickets or, working with our friends to raise funds for different things that were important to us. And all of that is crowdfunding. If we think about it, people have really been crowdfunding forever. The first instance, like the first formal instance recorded of crowdfunding was really Alexander Pope, who was translating the Iliad, which was the big, as you know, the epic by Homer, and he was translating it into English. And he wanted to raise money for printing the book and translating it. And he actually said that if people funded it, he would give them free copies in exchange for the book. Similarly, if you think about the Indian independence movement, so many incidents of crowdfunding have really enabled the fact that we are in a country where we can call ourselves an independent democratic country. And a lot of that has come because people came together not just with funds, but with their efforts, their commitment and passion to bring forth a country that they were proud of. The base of the Statue of Liberty was also crowdfunded in America. All of us know that the government of France gifted the Statue of Liberty to America in the 1700s, and the base was actually crowdfunded by the local people. Similarly, Nehru crowdfunded when the war against China was happening. He actually raised a huge crowdfunding campaign asking people to donate so that we could deploy more resources towards the front line. And lastly, all of us are very familiar with these big concerts that keep happening. So Live Aid, which happened many, many years ago, to address hunger in Africa in particular, where all these massive rock bands came together and all the ticket sales were actually contributing towards ensuring a sort of hunger-free Africa. Um, so when we think about these examples, none of them were really like, looking at the modern day crowdfunding platform, so to speak, but really the principle of it is exactly the same. Whether you look at some of the crowdfunding platforms that are there today, whether it's Impact Guru or Let's Change or Keto or Wishberry, which is more for the arts, or Indiegogo, there are tons of options which are available, and they all, Milap now has a really fancy interface and a huge crowdfunding platform, and all of them have gone and become really, really sophisticated and added a whole lot of technology onto their platforms. But at the base, the principle really is that it enables you to reach large numbers of people in an effortless manner. Enrolling onto these crowdfunding platforms is fairly simple. Usually you need to just start a page. You can customize videos, you can add in your own pictures, you can customize the kind of reminders you send people. For people who do donate to you, you can even ensure that they get their tax receipts, etc. So I think the technology really enables it, but at the core, it's really enabling you to reach out to as many of your supporters as possible. Before I go into case stories, I'd really like to talk about a few good principles of fundraising, and a lot of these crowdfunding principles are related to storytelling in many ways. But yeah, moving on to that. Uh, One of the things that I always like to say about crowdfunding, because these days crowdfunding is really more about using online platforms than anything else. The online platform is just a vehicle. And what it enables you to do is really reach out to people. But the way to work and use these online platforms is really to tap your offline networks. So the whole idea is, if you think of yourself as, in this web of people, and if you can actually draw yourself as a circle and then draw like a, connection to somebody else, and then draw their connections to other people, and you actually map out your entire network of, in the case of organizations that work on animal rights, if you look at all your supporters, so your, people who've donated to you in the past, your personal friends and family, your board members, people who have been friends, friends of friends, people who've come and volunteered with you. If you can use that network, particularly your volunteers, if you can use their network and ask them to work with their friends or their friends of friends and create, under a larger campaign, create a whole series of sub campaigns. The more offline reach you have, the better chance you will have of your online campaign doing well. Often what we do is we go onto a crowdfunding platform and we just start this campaign, and we expect that because we've put it in, we put it out on our social media platforms, suddenly you'll get this groundswell of income which will come in, but that's not the case. You really need to work offline with your existing donors, your existing supporters, friends, family, all of them, to then share in their network. So each of them then becomes like almost like a hub and spoke model, where each of them becomes a proponent for you, for your organization. I think what's really important when you're sort of briefing people who are crowdfunding for you, and I think the best resource when you're crowdfunding would be volunteers who work with you. And young people are always the ones who bring the most energy to crowdfunding platforms and crowdfunding campaigns. And if people can sense the authenticity and belief in your appeal, and they're moved to act. So if you tell, even in your case, or whether you're working with volunteers or with donors who are helping you to crowdfund, if they just put a social media link on, on their, on Facebook or Instagram, which sends people to their crowdfunding site, that is likely to have almost zero impact. as opposed to if they send the link on their personal WhatsApp messages, telling people stories about why this particular crowdfunding campaign matters so much to them. If they can really give the person a sense of why it matters to them at a personal level, as well as the sort of impact that it'll bring, that's when you start getting, huge changes in the kind of response you can get to a campaign. I think one of the things we always tell volunteers and people who are crowdfunding for us is that you should really believe in the need to do this work. And when you're talking about a campaign, it is really critical that you do it in story form and you do it in a way that's fun and engaging. And the more you decide to take it out and to make it engaging and exciting for people, and where you replace your embarrassment with pride, and some of the pictures here kind of demonstrate the sort of fun you can have, the more people will get drawn in, the more they will be likely to get involved in the issue that you are raising funds for. What's really critical always is that you thank your supporters at the end of the campaign, so that they feel, firstly, thank your volunteers as well who've helped you fundraise, as well as the final donor. So both of them, make sure that you've closed that loop. And also, the other loop that's really critical is often we do big crowdfunding campaigns and then we say, oh, thank you so much. We've raised all the money we needed and we're closing the campaign. But rarely do we go back and close the loop and tell the story of what happened with the money. And Animal Aid is a great example of how everything that they do is done through stories in the most amazing manner. And, every single, like, I really follow Animal Aid's social media handles. Erica used to be a board member. It's one of the founding members of FIAPO. And I'm just amazed at how they're able to, through such simple pictures and, tell stories which leave you feeling like you want to come back for more. So I think there's a lot to learn. And if you don't already follow Animal Aid's social media handles, I'd really recommend that you do. But it's really critical that if you're running a crowdfunding campaign or you're asking people for donations, you close the loop and you go back and you actually, show them the kind of change they were able to bring, give them a whole series of anecdotes and stories which impact people at a very personal level. And it's not just about numbers, because often we just say, you helped us impact, like in case you're raising for a shelter, like, 50 dogs in this shelter, you were able to provide medical aid in this situation, which is great. But if you add a whole lot of stories which talks about Chotu who had this problem and now, his problems could be addressed, or, like in this case, blind Henry who came with a maggot issue and how they were able to address it, you just bring it alive. And the stories stay in people's minds much longer than any kind of numbers that you could ever tell them. And those stories are really what moves them to being long-term supporters and people who will come back to you time and time again every time you run a campaign. I think the crowdfunding campaign is really an opportunity for you to draw in new supporters. And then the whole exercise, every time you do a crowdfunding campaign, it's almost like, doing this sort of multiplier effect where you suddenly do this boom and you bring in new supporters. But then the work is, how do you retain them? How do you keep them engaged? How do you keep bringing them back? How do you, engage them on an ongoing basis? Some of the, and I've taken examples from across the world, but some of the examples that have resonated with me, which I wanted to share with you, which I thought would be useful, are of some great fundraising campaigns. One is from Friendicos, and I know a lot of you would be familiar with this, but Friendicos, this is, I think, about 5 or 7 years ago when Friendicos ran out of money because the MCD wasn't giving them their dues, and they threatened to shut down. And at that time, Friendicos didn't do any online fundraising at all. They didn't, I think they had on their website, they had like a bank account with NEF details with nothing else on the website. And one volunteer, basically, at that time, there was a crowdfunding platform called BitGiving. One volunteer went and started a page and, put it out with a whole bunch of her friends that Friendicos is going to shut down and, we need to raise, I think, 20 lakhs at that time, or 10 lakhs was the target she'd put down. They managed to raise 20 lakhs in 24 hours. And this was because of this huge goodwill that Friendicos had in the city, because so many of us have called. And I live in Delhi, but Friendicos pretty much is the go-to organization when you want animals to be rescued, when you have injured animals, or you want dogs spayed or neutered or whatever, any issue that you want is usually addressed by Friendicos. They're like the go-to organization. They raised 20 lakhs in 24 hours because they had this huge goodwill in the city. Eventually, I think they closed the campaign 3 weeks later with 80 lakhs, and they had no idea that they had this goodwill and this capacity. So really, I think the key over there is that one, if you're clear that you have this large supporter base, and in this case, the volunteer really was the catalyst who did that. And then the stories that they told about it, the way they shared it, the way, I mean, if you even look at the pictures that are here, and the very, very compelling sort of story about Friendico shutting down. And if you don't, join into the campaign at that moment, then, basically you're going to be in a situation where you won't have anybody to call next time you're in trouble. So this went completely viral in the city. And I think everyone sort of knew that you had to contribute. My own son, I remember he was in grade 5 or something. He, for his birthday, raised money for Friendicos instead of accepting gifts, and raised some 20,000 rupees from all his friends for it. So pretty much everyone I knew was fundraising for them at the time. This is a non-animal rights example, but it's something called Red Nose Day, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but it's a very, very big campaign that's run every year in the UK initially, and then eventually in the US as well. And it's run by an organization called Comic Relief, and it works to alleviate child poverty. And Red Nose Day, the reason it's called Red Nose Day is because clowns wear red noses, right? And you can see the kind of mnemonic they have there. And the whole idea is, sorry, I think somebody's raised their hand, but should I stop or should I continue?
Yogita, you can continue now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so Red Nose Day basically is that what they do is they have this huge telethon on TV which raises funds from people. But more than the telethon, what they do is they ask people to do different comic acts. So like people who go into office and do little stand-up comedy, or they play pranks on their friends, or they, do little like, little skits and things like that, which are all around comedy. And the whole idea is that have fun on this day and raise funds for us. And it is like, it has swept, like in the UK, Red Nose Day is this cult concept. Like everybody in the UK on Red Nose Day will know that Red Nose Day is happening, and you're going to get pranked when you get into office or into your college, and even the telethon that they have, which is like a program that they run on their national, on BBC, I think, which runs for several hours, which is all these different like actors who come and do little comic acts, little, performers who come and do acts, and they're all around just comedy and having a lot of fun around it. And it's a day that most people in the UK look forward to. Another one, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with this thing called Movember, which is the Men's Health Awareness Month. And it's basically all these men who grew their mustaches and raise funds by growing their mustaches through, a whole lot of social media posts. I had a friend who used to every November do this crazy thing where his mustache would, like, there would be all sorts of crazy designs. It would go downwards. He'd have handlebar mustaches like the one you have here. And through a really, fun sort of jocular campaign, tell the story of how men's health was important and there was just not enough money being devoted to it, and raise funds for it. I'm sure all of you know about the famous Ice Bucket Challenge. I don't know how many of you know that it raised $98 million in just 1 month. And I think the reason it became so popular was Bill Gates did the Ice Bucket Challenge for the ALS Society, which was a disease which nobody knew about at the time. And now I think everybody knows about it. But he did the Ice Bucket Challenge, and then it just went viral, and they raised a ton of money for it. And lastly, and this is my last slide, is I think the real like the backbone of a good crowdfunding campaign really is the narrative or the story that sort of holds it together. And here's an example. So there was this young teenage boy who used to sit outside the metro station, and he was studying for exam. He's really studious, but he didn't have money to go through to pay for his education and things like that. And he used to basically get people to weigh themselves and pay for it. And somebody who was traveling in the metro, Vikas Sharda, took a photo of it, put it online, it went viral, and money just poured in for him. And I think just that compelling story along with the picture was enough for people to feel that, here's a really committed child whose life we can change by contributing funds. So I think when we're crafting a campaign, it's really, really critical to say what's that key message, which is, that story which just hooks in the audience and gives them a really, really strong reason to believe in my particular issue or cause, my particular organization. And how can I motivate more and more people to get involved? How can I inspire volunteers to go out there and raise funds for me, or supporters to go out, or donors to share it with their other friends and bring in more funds? So really, that's the big message of this presentation. I'm going to pause here and hand over to Bharti.
Thanks, Yogita. I'm just going to share. I do have a presentation, but like Yogita said, I'm really hoping to make this very, very interactive. So, one of the things that I say is that everyone tells stories, right? Everyone, all of us, we've grown up listening to stories. Our grandmothers, I once read a blog post that said your grandmother is a better fundraiser than you. And that is so true, because the archetypal grandmother picture that we have in our heads is someone who tells stories, and we've all grown up listening to stories. Okay. But when we start raising money for our organizations, for our work, we start to say, okay, I will tell you a case study. So have you gone and ever told somebody, let me tell you a case study, and have they been interested? We don't tell case studies. Nobody is interested in listening to case studies. But the moment we switch that around and we say, let me tell you a story, I think immediately the attention of a lot of people is captured. So I'm actually going to start this by telling a story. And this is a very famous story about this David Ogilvy, who was an well, he's one of the advertising greats. And it's a story, I don't know whether it's actually true or not, but he was walking by on the road, and he saw a man sitting trying to, with a little tin, trying to raise money. And the man was blind, and there was a placard there that said, "I'm blind, please help." And in the tin, there were one or two coins. So the young David Ogilvy just took up the thing, made some changes. He wrote some extra words on that placard. And very soon, the very next day, money just started to pour in, and the tin filled up. So what were the words that Ogilvy wrote that changed the way people started to give? So he wrote, "I am blind and it's spring." The moment he did that, someone who was passing by, what do they think? What are you reminded of? You're reminded of our memories of spring. This is actually a photo from my road here in Bangalore. This tree is a very famous Bangalore tree called the Tabibuya. It blooms in March, April, and the whole road fills up with these pink flowers. I don't know why cherry blossoms are so famous, but our Tabebuya flowers are not so famous. But you know immediately that it's spring. So any person who passes by and reads this, "I'm blind and it's spring," will immediately associate it with, I'm able to see the flowers, I'm able to see the trees, I'm able to see so many things, so many different colors, the sights that are there of spring, but this person can't see. So immediately there is a story that gets created in the person's mind just by the addition of three words. So a story really doesn't have to be a very long story. As we have found out here, just three words can make a story. It can create a picture in the reader's mind. So ultimately, what we realize from this is that storytelling is not always about showing the donor what you need. It is about showing the donor what's possible, that the possibility of what happens when you give money, the change that is possible. So that's why sometimes we don't just say storytelling, we say stories of change. So in the nonprofit sector, when we try to raise money, we don't just say, we tell stories. we tell stories of change because we want to show people what is possible, the change that is possible through our work, and why they should be supporting that. But let's move a step backward and see, why do stories work? Are we, Yogita saying and Bharati saying, let's say, let's tell stories. Is that why we tell stories? Or is there a scientific reason why stories work well in fundraising? And actually, there is a science behind it. Um, the storytelling, when you tell somebody a story, or when you write a story and we read a story, it stimulates parts of the brain that make us feel as though we are actually there. So for example, when you watch a movie, right, you are in the movie sometimes, right? You feel like you're experiencing the movie. When you're reading a really interesting book, don't you feel like you're actually in the book? So storytelling stimulates all of that. Otherwise, when we just read an appeal, we want an ambulance and we want to raise funds for an ambulance because we have 3,000 stray dogs in the area and they get rescued, there's only one part of the brain that is stimulated, which is the language part. But when we tell a story, all parts of the brain are stimulated and all parts of the brain are acting. And actually, there's a piece of research that says that when the brain watches or reads a story, then the brain is no longer a spectator. The reader is not just watching, the reader becomes a participant. Okay, so what better way do we have than to make the reader, the donor, a participant in our story, why we want to raise money. The second thing that happens is that stories actually stimulate certain chemicals in our brain that cause us to be more empathetic. So when we read a story, we are moved. We say, because we are lay people, we just say, oh, we are moved. But actually, there are chemicals being secreted in our brains, and those chemicals make us want to give. So this is the power that storytelling, you can just take it, that it is not just Yogita and Bharti who are saying these things, but actually there is a reason why we tell stories when we raise funds. Now, I have a film here, which is very short. It's about 1 minute, but it's in English. Would everyone be comfortable watching it?
Yes.
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 Okay. So we all went through 2 years of, what did we go through 2 years of? And that we are out of right now? COVID, that's right. So this is really immediately after COVID, and this is a foundation called the Born Free Foundation, and they wanted to highlight the issue of animals in captivity. So I'm going to play this film. It's very short, so I hope that you will enjoy it. And then we'll talk about
I think
it.
there's been times where you do feel just a bit rubbish and just feel sorry for yourself.
I think that's what living with me 24/7 is. Yeah.
It's like it feels almost surreal. Like you feel as if you've kind of stepped into this alternate reality that isn't your norm. Like for me, my norm is do what I want. Like, and then all of a sudden it's almost like a social castration.
It's a
Make it through this lockdown.
My child, it was very difficult to explain. Why can't we go out? She would say, and it's like, oh, we just can't.
You wonder just how much longer it's going on for, though, don't you?
All right. So we watched this film. Now, Can anyone tell me, what do you think Born Free Foundation did with this film? What did they do in writing the story? Anyone? It's all right. We can take a guess. Yes, Yogita.
I'm presuming they took quotes from people who were in lockdown.
Exactly. So, these are emotions that we have gone through while we've been in lockdown. How much longer is it going to be? What do I explain to my child? They made us a part of it. Exactly, sort of. So these are all things that human beings experienced. So they created a story of animals and these are exactly the things we've said during the lockdown. And they just made us realize that for some animals, it's their entire life. And we were complaining bitterly after 2 years. We know the kind of mental strain that we went through in the 2 years of the lockdown. But for a lot of animals, it was, just their whole life. So what they did was they had a story in which there were characters. They caught hold of an emotion that the reader understands. Basically, they took an emotion that the reader would understand, the reader would feel, and they could have easily said a one page that just said, just 2 lines that said, you knew what it was like to be locked up during the lockdown. Um, Now help us free animals. Just 2 lines, right? But what would have happened if you just read those two lines? It's like a VLCC ad for weight loss. You think it's photoshopped, right? You don't really believe that someone went through the change. But actually, when you watch the film, the watcher realizes that these are emotions that we have felt, and you give the reader or the donor a chance to feel what animals might be feeling also when they are captive their whole lives. So the other thing that I want to show you is this. Are you able to see what are you able to see on your, okay, you're only seeing so I have to stop sharing this in order to start sharing what I want to show you. Just a minute, please. All right. So this, I think all of us would have seen it and completely loved it. And this is a brilliant piece of storytelling, because what it immediately, so Row Rehab works with quadriplegic, paraplegic animals and really gives them the cycles or the wheels, the chairs that they need to be able to run. And instead, or they could have easily had an appeal, and they do have an appeal on a crowdfunding platform, which says that we have so many dogs, we have so many paraplegic dogs, this is our need. But their biggest fundraising came after they launched this video on the occasion of Independence Day. And the reason that happened is because through this, I'm happily showing the slides without scrolling through the slides without showing you the slides. Okay, so what did they do? Row Rehab started to show what is possible to the donor. They started to show not the need, which is they could have easily said, we need money for wheels, for cycles, for cars. But what they showed was what was possible. How does the animal run after you have given this donation? And they also harness the power of the underdog. So, we all love to see films, we love books in which the underdog gets really wins So if you see any boxing film or if you see any sport film, always you will see that, Yogita Verma, any film, Chak De India, take whatever film you like, it's the underdog who then wins, who has us rooting for that person. So in this particular story by Road Rehab actually captured two of these things. It showed donors what was possible, and it also harnessed the power of the underdog and showed us how, with a donation, how their lives could be changed. And this is evidence that this little piece is from Road Rehab's fundraising page, and there's actually a donor who is saying, are you able to read this, or is it too small? Yeah, I'm just going to highlight that. It says, what drew me to this donation was the fabulous post I saw on Instagram for India's 75th Independence Day. So just that one story was able to draw people to the fundraising website and get people to give. So it's the same kind of stories. Stories, again, need not be very, very long. They can be very brief. They can be very small, and you can tell them. The important things that we need to do, we've talked about 3 points earlier, is the other thing is you acknowledge shared experiences. Sometimes, when we write to a donor, we are telling them that we almost try and separate ourselves from the donor. Like, we are fighting this problem. We have dogs that need adoption. We are struggling with this problem. And but we don't acknowledge that the donor has similar problems. The donor might already be a person who is caring for dogs on the streets. The donor might already be a person who is feeding dogs. And actually, those are our when we address those people in our communication, they are our best donors, right? Rather than trying to raise money from somebody who completely doesn't like animals, we should try and raise money from somebody who already likes animals. That's easier to do. And when we acknowledge the shared experience, not say as an organization, we are doing this, so please give us money. But when we say that this is something that what a big struggle it is, and will you then help us with this particular struggle? You make them part of this struggle. Remind the donor of an emotion that they have felt, like, the lockdown film did. So where do we find these stories? I really feel that there are stories all around us. And if we, for those of us who work with animals, it's there in every animal that we have in our shelters. Animal aid is a big example. Welfare of stray dogs, if you look at them, each dog has a story. In my own area here, every dog in our area, every stray has a story. And we used the stories of all our strays. We had a competition, and then we had 12 animals whose stories were highlighted in a calendar that raised us a lot of money. So we've used the stories of animals for fundraising. And these are all around us. Even if we don't work with, say, a shelter. For example, for FIAPO, we don't work directly with shelters. We don't have a shelter. We do workshops. And in the workshops, some very interesting conversations happen. Sometimes some young college student says to us, I have never thought about animals like this. I always liked dogs and cats, but I never thought that a farmed animal or a pig or a chicken was an individual. I've never thought of a chicken as an individual in my life. That is a story, because at that moment there is somebody's life, mind that has changed. There's a shift that has happened. So these are stories that are all around us, and we need to keep listening for these stories. Thanks, Kush. Thank you so much. Then how do you collect stories? So I just want to quickly say, like Animal Aid, I have seen the person who collects these stories, and she has a notebook in which she is writing down details, of every animal that's coming in. And it's not a sophisticated system, but it's a system that's really works for them. It's a notebook and a pen, and it's that easy to collect stories. And how do you write a story? How do you write a good story? My biggest tip for that is don't write a story. Start by telling a story to someone. Start by telling it to anyone, a student, someone in your organization, someone in your family. In telling the story, you will know what is effective and then write it. So start by telling the story. And when you tell the story, how do you know what words to choose? Don't, again, think of yourself as telling the story. Show them the story, like the David Ogilvy story, where it's I'm blind and it's spring. Show what is around. Just that the road rehab video showed people how dogs run when they have these wheels. And you can write stories which show people the reality. So I would say that, so for example, I just want one example that an appeal that we did for WWF. And this was about olive ridley turtles. And the common, the donor has no connection with olive ridley turtles. We don't know anything at all. The normal, lay person has no connection. How do you tell people to care about olive ridley turtles? What was that point of connection? We all know how we did A for apple, B for ball, C for cat, D for dog when we were in school. So we created these little square coasters where we did T for turtle, and we crossed out the turtle and we said T for traffic. And this was a connection that we found. This was a story, though it doesn't look like a story, but this is a connection that you find with the donor's mind, and you connect them to the story that you're then going to tell about olive ridleys and why it's important to save them. So that's all. I'm just going to stop right here. It's not so much about directly how to write stories, but it's more about how to make anything a story. And as long as you can find a connection with your donor, that becomes a story for you. Okay, we don't need to do this. We can leave.
Thank you so much, Bharati. Thank you so much, Yogita. I think both the presentations were very, very insightful and with so many captivating stories to, take back as well. Okay, now moving on to the Q&As. Firstly, I would like to take the question by Kush. So storytelling can be from the viewpoint of a single animal or rescue, or from the viewpoint of a group of rescues, let's say 100 rescues, as to how a particular campaign will benefit the entire group. What is a better storytelling approach? Yogita, Bharti?
So I mean, there is nothing like a better storytelling approach. It's what you feel the most at that point in time, honestly. So there are two ways you can do it. You can enter it from talking about a particular animal or a rescue, and then expand saying there are 100 other such. So for example, if you're, and like we do a lot of rescue work in the area that we live in, and usually the way we would raise funds is you would talk about one case story. So so for example, we have a dog called Mouse outside our house. Mouse is always has epileptic fits. She needs a lot of doctor visits. There are many such dogs who don't have, and then you always relate it to, you love dogs, you have dogs in your homes, you know that your AC is on 24 hours, in your house in the heat, these dogs are out at 40 degrees, etc. And you therefore try to bring that emotion of what Mouse is experiencing into relating it to, how comfortable your dog's life is at home, and then expand it to the larger community of dogs outside. Or, so that's one approach where you take one case story and you talk about, or it could be a case story about somebody who's helping with the dogs. So it could be the case story of a feeder who's going and feeding 100 dogs. Yeah. So every story has, you can enter the narrative from different points. I think the thing to do is to really say what makes the most compelling, heartfelt case when you yourself listen to it. So if you talk to a friend, or you talk to, an associate or someone, and you narrate the story, what hits. The thing with donation is it is a mix of emotion, and so it's always heart first, then head. So what hits the heart and then hits the head, saying, okay, I feel passionately about what you're saying. And then your head saying, oh my God, this is a big problem. Why don't I do something about it? So the kind of invitation would be is there's no prescription. Yeah, but really say what are the different angles you can take at the same problem and just try narrating it to people around you and sort of feel your way through what works best. But you will always find something compelling if you keep trying with different angles. Yeah, Bharti.
No, that's absolutely right, Yogita. One of the things I did was I studied the Instagram channel of Raw Rehab. And they didn't realize at one point what a successful video that they had on their hands. If you see all the other videos, those videos have maybe 50, 100, 2,000 likes, and then suddenly there's this one video which has 37,000 likes, and then tons of shares. And they then realized that there was something in that that was capturing the attention. Once they got that, they tested various things. There were individual stories, there were multiple, group stories, all of that. Then they started using that kind of a thing again and again. And, we might say, oh, we've already done it once, we don't have to repeat it. But when we have a winning formula, we can use it again and again, because different people will be seeing it and it will remind us. So, we just need to test what works for us the best.
I also think the thing with Roar is the cleverness there is that they synced it with Independence Day. So please use days in this, like just use them, because people are in that mood, the flag is waving outside and it's just another narrative. It's so fresh because you're plastered with all these very sort of, boring and blah kind of, patriotic ads around you, which you've seen every 15th August, you see them. And suddenly you see this thing which makes you feel like, alive and free, and in an odd sense even more patriotic, so to see and so it's just a fabulous example of storytelling there. And came from it by chance or not. Absolutely, it relates to freedom in the best possible manner. What does it mean to be free? Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Bharti and Yogita. Moving on
Darshan has said something.
Yes.
Sorry.
Darshan has mentioned that thank you for reinforcing the belief in stories. We have had such experience with instantaneously made the Manja ban possible by over 2.5 lakh school kids quitting kite flying in one season. That's amazing, Darshan. Moving on to the next question.
Sorry, Archita, would Darshan like to share like how he did that? I would love to hear.
Darshan, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, it was actually a life-changing moment for us also, because we started with actually highlighting the bird rescue, which was our first campaign. And what happened was that as we started rescue and showing up for the calls, people started reporting more and more. So over 3 years or 4 years, we were just increasing the rescues, but and side by side we were getting frustrated at that there are the people are not actually realizing the real problem, that the injury and trauma is the main thing, not that we are doing the rescue. So we actually had to bring their attention to this fact, and we tried almost everything. We showed around a lot of injured bird videos, and at a time we actually had 25 full-size hoardings of Surat having these birds pictures and campaigns and appeals and all, but nothing seemed to work. So what we did was we just out of a brainstorming session, we wrote a story which had birds as humans in person. So we put a family story of a family where the father goes out and do not return from the work. So that was a story written in Gujarati, and it was targeted to kindergarten and primary kids. And schools were very kind enough to take a printout and give an assignment to the kids to take the story home and make the parents read it. And immediately, just in 1 year, we had around 16 schools voluntarily canceling the holiday for Uttarayan. They had the rescue centers, and kids actually, started immediately started working for birds. And it was such a major thing. So it was just like the accident that we shared from the raw rescue. It was, and then later on we dubbed it with a voice and put a voice stories. And at one time when the our PIL was rejected from the Gujarat High Court, and now after the 3 or 4 years of campaigning, the Gujarat state government itself has a bird rescue campaign called Karuna Abhiyan, and they make it mandatory for people to join that. And also we actually know that it was just because of that two pet story that happened.
Unbelievable. Super.
Yeah, we'll share that story. It's like in Gujarati, but I mean, I think that is it's quite relatable. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was at Tribe, our best performing emailer, we sent like this not email at that time, we used to do snail mail. We sent out this snail mail which had a piece of sandpaper on it, and we used to send mailers out every month, right? And you knew what their performance was. Our best performing ones was this piece of sandpaper, and it said, "This is what Raju's hands feel like after a hard day at labor." It's just like, like you didn't need to write anything else. It was just a different take, which is why,
Yeah.
test, and keep trying.
It's also like that asthma foundation in the UK, where they had this straw and they attached a straw to the mailer and they sent it. And they said, take the straw and put it up your, one nose, close the other, and try breathing through this. And then they said, this is how an asthmatic person breathes all the time. So immediately what you're doing is you're making a connection. You're bringing the reader or the donor, you're making the donor experience what the life of the child, the asthmatic person feels like.
Great. Thank you so much, Darshan, for sharing the story with us. Moving on to the next question. It says that it's overwhelming to see so many stories. Most of them induce guilt and one isn't able to keep up. How do you share a story without it being too morbid or gory? Bharati, would you like to take this?
So I think guilt is not a useful emotion in fundraising. I think sharing the possibility of what we can do together is a much stronger emotion. And I've been actually doing a lot of reading about this, and people might give, I don't know, Yogita, you can share your experience around this, but I find that people might give once out of guilt, but usually when they start to expect it, they will just they will not even register. The human tendency is to ignore, because they already anticipate what morbid picture or story is likely to come. So I would rather increase the happiness quotient and get people to focus on the possibilities of what you and I together can do. If you have an interest, I have an interest, give us money and together we can do this. I think that's a much stronger motive than guilt or the shock value, all of which I feel have a temporary shelf life. Yogita?
No, absolutely. I think hope is a much more powerful emotion. And I think that guilt is also, there's something about ethics of fundraising, like guilting people into like sort of extorting money from them is like a gimmick which I would not prescribe it at all. And if you want donors to stay with you for the long term, then you want to focus on what you can build together. And the invitation should be such that, this is what's possible if you join us. And I think that should be like the narrative we have even for ourselves internally. And it shouldn't just be let's make a quick buck by putting these really pathetic pictures. And, I like in the animal rights space, some of the pictures you see are like, they should not be put out because it's almost scary. Like people want to just run from them. I think the raw video is a great example of how you can use happiness and, freedom to kind of demonstrate a much better alternative. So I went and donated based on that video, I remember. So yeah.
Also, you brought up this very interesting point about ethics, Yogita, which, whether it's raising funds for humans or animals, the dignity of the person or animal for whom we're raising money is so important. And if we portray them in a way that is really pitiable, then I don't think we're doing the right thing. So, yeah.
But it's not to say that you don't highlight the issues. You highlight them, but the visual depiction is always about a better world is possible and join us. I at least for me, I've always believed that works in a more powerful manner.
Absolutely. Also, now that you have mentioned the visual depiction as well, moving on to our next question. So, are there any tips we can keep in mind when we want to tell a story through video format? Yogita, would you like to give any input?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're learning, and I'm presuming that video format is more for like social media and WhatsApp forwards and all, because that's where the money is really now sitting. And, nobody does these long videos anymore.
Mhm.
But what we have learned from at least the work we're doing at Breakthrough is that the more sort of raw and unfiltered they are, the better response we get to them, because everybody's so used to user generated content now. So the influencers people are following, they're doing like one day in their lives and they're like taking them around their homes. So the minute the video looks like a slick, very well edited film, people are just losing interest. They don't see themselves in it, they don't feel empathy. The minute it feels like someone like me is out there, so if the minute you have a very slick production, you don't feel like it's a relatable sort of situation. So that's been one of our things, is that actually what we think are the most like not the best looking videos, but are just more about the emotion that you see over there, those are working much better these days. The other thing that for fundraising videos as a thumb rule that we're using is not more than 20 seconds if you're on social media. Yeah, use many 20-second videos, 30-second videos at max. We tend to want to tell long stories. No people first person, nobody wants to listen. Use more visual, just maybe use a little bit of type this thing. And I would really recommend all of you be on Instagram as much as possible. Look at reels, because that is where the action is. As much as some of it is rubbish, but it gives you a very good visual reference for what people are using. Absolutely, Darshan. They look staged and nobody thinks it's plausible. Also, like if you have money to make this big production, like do you really need money from me? So that's also the thing. So one of the things we always did with Cry was we never did glossy paper. We would always make the paper like black and white print, because you don't want to look like you have a lot of money, Donors would say, why are you sending me this? So we stopped, snail mail for a long while. So all of that.
Also, resist the temptation to talk about your organization. Because most of us, we start with so-and-so is, FIAPO is the Apex Federation of Organizations, and so many members, and nobody is interested in the organization. They are interested in the work. So.
Thank you, Bharati. Thanks, Yogita. We have two more questions, so we'll quickly take both of them. So there is also an influx of stories and content these days on social media. How do we innovate the art of storytelling through social media? You have already touched on this briefly. Would you like to add anything else to this?
So I think the only thing with social media is that you need to be constantly on your toes. So you need to be like there is a new wave every like week. And if you're able to get into that pulse, it is really cool. There'll always be a new meme or a new sort of way of doing videos which everyone has suddenly is interested in for 3 days, and then it moves on. So you need young, please don't have people like my age sitting on your social media handles. Please get some 20-year-old to run your social media handles and tell stories in the manner that the sort of platform demands. And speak in the language of the platform is really what we really put a lot of premium on innovation, which is great. I would really say tell great stories in the kind of the cool thing of the moment. Focus on the story and then use what's kind of really in fashion for that week, and the chances that you'll get picked up are much higher.
Would you like to add anything to this, Bharati?
So I just want to quote, there's this fundraising sort of guru almost called Ken Burnett, and he would say that innovation is just overrated and consistency is far more important. And especially in social media, you might make the greatest, best, beautiful video and you put it out, and then for the next 3 weeks or 3 months, no one hears from you. It's just not going to make a difference at all. So I don't think, we should push ourselves to be innovative rather than that. If, as Yogita said, someone who's constantly on the medium, and the thing is that we need people who are on Instagram. If we are on Twitter, then who are on Twitter, who know how it works and who know it instinctively, rather than, okay, it's my job and I need to do it. So yeah, consistency is, I think, the innovation that we can aspire for.
All right, now we'll just take the last questions. So in this sea of stories that we come across on social media and even through different platforms, any last tips on how we can make one story stand out from the rest? Last tips that you would like to share or highlight?
For me, it's really go with your gut. If it the first time you watch your own video, or you narrate that have your look at the sort of the visual that you're using, if it hits you in your gut, it'll hit the other people. I think when we over science it and we put pressure on innovation, and then we say, what do other people think? And we put it through 100 filters, and then we try to please everybody in the office. And I would really say, focus on whether the story is clear and whether your instinct tells you it's good, and just keep test. And like Bharti said, have people who understand the medium running the platform.
Can I put up one slide in answer?
Sure, yes.
I'm just, so these are words and that need to be thrown out of the office. Whether your fundraiser says, CEO says, executive director says, founder says, board member, the saying that I like it and therefore it will work is really one of the biggest problems in storytelling. And we should believe only actually what works with the donor. Trust the evidence. Don't trust your CEO. Don't trust your fundraiser. Don't trust board member. Don't trust founder. Trust the donor and the results that you get.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Yogita. Thank you so much, Bharti. With this, we are at the end of the session today. And I'm really grateful for both of you for all the interesting insights that you have shared. I'm pretty sure it has helped all the attendees, and it will also, the webinar will also be available on our YouTube channel very soon. So if you would like to revisit, you can revisit it on FIAPO's YouTube channel as well. And with this, I would like to conclude the session. Any parting thoughts, Bharti and Yogita? Anything you'd like to add?
Just thanks to everyone.
All
really. And thank you, Darshan, for your
All
contribution.
Yes, thank you so much, Darshan, for sharing the story as well. And all right, then, happy weekend to everyone. And with this, we are ending the session. Thank you
all. Bye-bye.